Commander Jake Tank Morrison was having what he generously called one of those decades, when the distress signal crackled through the communication array of his research vessel, the Lucky Break. The ship's name was either deeply ironic or prophetic, depending on whether you asked Tank or his AI companion, Morris. Well, Morris announced in his perpetually sarcastic synthetic voice. It appears we have a Priority 1 distress call from Harmony's Edge Research Station. How delightfully predictable. Nothing says Tuesday like responding to someone else's catastrophic life choices. Tank leaned back in his captain's chair, which creaked in a way that suggested it had seen better centuries. What's the nature of the emergency, Morris? And please tell me it's not another we accidentally created sentient pudding situation. I'm still finding sparkles in my hair from the last one. Oh, this is much better, Commander. According to the transmission, they've somehow managed to encounter a Shadowfang. You know, those delightful creatures that make entire star systems file evacuation papers just from rumors of their presence? Tank nearly choked on his coffee, which was less coffee and more a caffeinated approximation of what coffee might taste like if you'd only heard it described by someone who'd never actually had any. A Shadowfang? Are you kidding me? Those things are basically galactic legends. Half the species in this sector think they're myths designed to keep children from wandering into dark nebulae. Myth or not, Harmony's Edge is broadcasting on all channels that they have one, and I quote, acting very weird around our human researcher, end quote. They've barricaded themselves in the central hub and are requesting immediate assistance from anyone with experience handling apex predators. Experience handling apex predators, Tank repeated slowly. Morris, my resume includes successfully talked down 3 different hive minds, survived first contact with the Jello Confederation, and once convinced a black hole to reconsider its dietary choices. Nowhere does it mention experience with legendary space monsters that supposedly eat starships for breakfast. Actually, Commander, according to my records, Shadowfangs prefer lunch, much more civilized timing for consumption of spacecraft. Tank stared at the view screen, where the coordinates for Harmony's Edge blinked insistently. The research station was only 6 hours away at maximum warp, which in galactic terms was basically next door. In practical terms, it meant he'd arrive just in time to either save everyone or become a footnote in someone else's very short obituary. Set course for the station, Maurice, and run a full scan of everything we know about Shadowfangs. I want to know exactly what we're walking into. Scanning now, Commander. Oh, this is fascinating. According to available data, Shadowfangs are approximately 4 meters long, have enough teeth to supply a small dental convention, possess claws that can cut through reinforced hull plating, and demonstrate pack-hunting behaviors that would make wolves weep with envy. They're also noted for their remarkable intelligence and their tendency to hold grudges across multiple generations. Wonderful. Anything else I should know before we potentially become the galaxy's most educated snack food? Just one small detail, Commander. In the past 1,000 years, there have been exactly 17 confirmed Shadowfang encounters. Of those 17 encounters, the survival rate was a robust 0%. However, I should note that none of those encounters involved humans, so we're technically in uncharted territory. Tank drummed his fingers on the armrest of his chair, a habit he'd developed during his years of making decisions that were either brilliant or catastrophically stupid, with very little middle ground. Morris, in your professional opinion as an artificial intelligence with access to the collective knowledge of 12 different galactic civilizations, what are the odds that this situation is exactly as straightforward as it appears? Commander, in my professional opinion, the odds that this situation is straightforward are approximately the same as the odds that you'll start keeping your quarters clean, remember to file your reports on time, and develop a sudden appreciation for opera. So, essentially 0. I prefer to think of it as statistically negligible, but yes. The Lucky Break shuddered slightly as it jumped to warp, and Tank settled in for what was either going to be a very short trip or the beginning of a very long adventure. Through the view screen, the stars stretched into familiar lines of light, and somewhere ahead of them, a research station full of terrified scientists was dealing with a creature that shouldn't exist, behaving in ways that made no sense, around the one species in the galaxy that apparently had never bothered to run away from anything. Morris, Tank said finally, remind me again why I didn't take that nice quiet job cataloging gas giant compositions in the Andromeda sector. Because, and I quote from your own personnel file, boring jobs are for boring people, and boring people don't get to discover cool stuff, end quote. Though I believe at the time you were slightly more intoxicated and significantly more optimistic about your life expectancy. Tank sighed and took another sip of his questionable coffee. Right, well, let's go discover some cool stuff. What's the worst that could happen? Commander, given our track record, I feel compelled to point out that you asking what's the worst that could happen has historically been the precursor to finding out exactly what the worst thing that could happen actually is. Fair point, Morris. In that case, let's go find out what the weird thing that's probably going to happen is instead. As the lucky break raced through hyperspace toward Harmony's edge, neither Tank nor Morris could have predicted that they were about to stumble into a revelation that would fundamentally change humanity's place in the galactic community. Or that Tank's afternoon was about to become significantly more complicated than his usual Tuesday routine of fixing broken equipment and pretending to understand xenobiology reports. But then again, that's what made life interesting. 6 hours later, Tank stood in the docking bay of Harmony's Edge Research Station, staring at what could generously be described as organized chaos. Equipment was scattered everywhere, blast doors hung at odd angles, and the air recycling system was making a noise that suggested it was either broken or deeply offended by something. Commander Morrison? A voice called from behind a makeshift barricade, constructed from overturned tables and what appeared to be several dozen coffee mugs. Thank the void you're here. I'm Dr. Luna Park, xenobiologist and current keeper of the galaxy's most awkward houseguest. Tank raised an eyebrow. Dr. Park was not what he'd expected. She was petite, wore a lab coat that had seen better decades, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail that suggested she'd been too busy to care about appearances for quite some time. Most remarkably, she seemed remarkably calm for someone who'd supposedly been trapped with a legendary apex predator. Dr. Park, Tank said carefully, where exactly is this Shadowfang? And why aren't you, dead? Oh, he's right over there, Park said, pointing casually toward the main laboratory. I call him Buster. He's been following me around for 3 days now, and honestly, he's better behaved than most of my graduate students ever were. Tank peered around the barricade and immediately understood why the other researchers had barricaded themselves. The creature lounging in the laboratory was, without question, the most terrifying thing he'd ever seen. It was roughly the size of a small shuttle, covered in midnight black fur that seemed to absorb light, and possessed enough teeth to outfit a dental convention for very large, very carnivorous beings. Its eyes glowed with an intelligence that suggested it was not only aware of being observed, but was probably judging everyone's life choices. Tank, said slowly, is definitely a Shadowfang. And you named it Buster? Well, I had to call him something, Park said defensively. He responds to it now. Watch this. Buster, sit. The massive creature, which could have easily torn through the station's hull with one claw, promptly sat down like an oversized, terrifying dog. Its tail, which was roughly the size of Tank's arm, and appeared to be equipped with natural armor plating, wagged slightly. Holy void, whispered a voice from deeper in the barricade. Captain Zeltak, the station's Zentorian commander, emerged cautiously. His normally pristine blue skin had taken on a distinctly pale shade. 3 days we have been trapped here. 3 days of watching this creature of legend behave like some kind of domesticated pet. It is deeply disturbing to witness. Science Officer Primo, a multi-tentacled being whose species was known for their rational approach to problem-solving, poked several eye stalks around the corner. The creature has demonstrated behaviors consistent with pack bonding, he said in his precisely clipped accent. It brings Dr. Park food, maintains physical proximity, and shows defensive posturing when we approach too quickly. It is most unscientific. Morris, Tank said quietly, please tell me you're recording this. Every disturbing second, Commander. I'm particularly fascinated by the way the creature's ears perk up when Dr. Park speaks. If I didn't know better, I'd say it was listening for commands. Park beamed proudly. Oh, he is. Watch this. Buster, down. The Shadowfang lowered itself to the floor, resting its massive head on its front paws. The movement revealed rows of teeth that could have easily severed a battleship's communication array, but the overall effect was somehow adorable was not the right word. Tank settled for deeply unsettling. Dr. Park, Tank said carefully, I need you to explain to me how you managed to turn the galaxy's most feared predator into what appears to be the universe's most dangerous therapy animal. Well, that's just it, Park said, her enthusiasm bubbling over. I didn't do anything special. When Buster first showed up, he was definitely acting like the apex predator everyone talks about. Lots of growling, threat displays, the usual "I could eat you all and use your bones as toothpicks" behavior. But then something weird happened. Weird how? Tank asked, though he suspected he was going to regret the question. He looked at me, really looked at me, and his whole demeanor changed, like he recognized something. Then he just settled down, started following me around. He even helped me organize my specimen samples, though I should mention he has very definite opinions about proper laboratory hygiene. Captain Zeltek made a sound that was either laughter or a mild nervous breakdown. "The creature sorted her chemical compounds by molecular weight," he said weakly. "We watched it happen. A being of pure, predatory instinct was alphabetizing research notes." Tank stared at the Shadowfang, which was now making a sound that could generously be described as purring, if purring were performed by a creature whose vocal cords were designed to intimidate small moons. There was something familiar about the creature's behavior, something that tugged at the edges of his memory. "Morris," he said finally, "run a behavioral analysis comparison. What does this remind you of?" "Scanning behavioral patterns now, Commander." Oh my, this is quite interesting. The creature's behaviors are remarkably similar to canine pack dynamics, specifically those observed in domesticated dogs interacting with recognized authority figures. "Dogs," Tank said. "You're telling me that the galaxy's most feared predator is acting like a dog? A very large, very well-armed dog with abandonment issues, but yes, the parallels are undeniable." Park clapped her hands together excitedly. "That's exactly what I thought. And here's the really weird part. Watch this. Buster, roll over." The massive creature looked at her for a moment, then performed what could only be described as the galaxy's most terrifying barrel roll. It was graceful, it was precise, and it was absolutely ridiculous. "I'm going to need a very strong drink," Tank muttered. "Possibly several." "Commander," Morris said, "I believe we may be dealing with a situation that extends far beyond a single anomalous creature. I'm detecting levitated stress hormones in all the non-human personnel, while Dr. Park's readings suggest she's actually enjoying herself." "Of course she is," Tank said. "She's turned first contact with a legendary space monster into an impromptu obedience training session. The question is, why is it working?" "Morris," Tank said, settling into a chair that had somehow survived the chaos, "I need you to run a deep scan. Something about this whole situation is pinging my there's more to this story sensors, and those are usually pretty reliable." "Already on it, Commander. I'm cross-referencing Shadowfang behavioral patterns with known pack animal dynamics across 17 different species databases. Also running historical scans for any previous human-Shadowfang interactions." Dr. Park perked up from where she was scratching behind Buster's ear, which was roughly the size of a dinner plate and apparently very sensitive. "You think there might be historical precedent for this? Because I've been wondering the same thing. Buster's reactions to me seem almost familiar. Like he's remembering something rather than learning something new." "Familiar how?" Tank asked, watching as the massive creature leaned into Park's touch with the contentment of a house cat, if house cats weighed 4 tons and could bite through starship hulls. "Well, for starters, he responds to basic commands in what I can only assume is his first language. No training period, no confusion, just immediate recognition and compliance. That suggests either incredible intelligence or prior conditioning." "Commander," Morris interrupted, his tone shifting from sarcastic to genuinely intrigued, "you're going to want to hear this. I've found something rather remarkable in Earth's archaeological records, specifically in cave paintings from approximately 40,000 years ago." "Cave paintings?" Tank raised an eyebrow. "Morris, please tell me we're not about to discover that ancient humans had a side hobby of drawing really inaccurate pictures of space monsters." "Oh, they're quite accurate, actually. Scanning imagery now and overlaying with current visual data. Commander, these aren't just random drawings. They're detailed depictions of creatures that are virtually identical to our friend Buster here, and they're consistently shown alongside human figures in what appears to be cooperative hunting scenarios." The laboratory fell silent except for Buster's continued purring, which was beginning to sound less terrifying and more like a very large, very contented engine. "Show me," Tank said. The laboratory's main display flickered to life, showing a series of cave paintings that were remarkably well preserved and astoundingly detailed. The images depicted creatures that were unmistakably Shadowfangs working alongside early humans, hunting massive prey, sharing kills, and in several images, apparently participating in what looked like organized pack activities. "Sweet nebulae," Captain Zeltak whispered. Those are definitely shadow fangs. But that would mean, Park finished excitedly, that humans and shadow fangs have a shared history. A partnership that goes back tens of thousands of years. Morris, what else can you tell me about this time period? Tank asked, leaning forward in his chair. Cross-referencing with anthropological data, Commander. During this period, humans were primarily nomadic hunter-gatherers, living in small tribal groups and following migration patterns of large prey animals. According to the genetic record, this was also a period of significant evolutionary pressure, with multiple competing predator species and rapidly changing environmental conditions. Tank stared at the images, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. So, humans were struggling to survive, and somehow they encountered shadow fangs. But, instead of becoming prey, they became partners. It makes perfect sense, Park said, her scientific excitement overriding any sense of caution. Look at the evidence. Humans are natural pack coordinators. We're excellent at strategic thinking, tool use, and communication. Shadow fangs are incredibly powerful, but appear to respond to strong leadership structures. You're suggesting, Science Officer Primo said slowly, that humans became the alpha leaders of shadow fang packs? Not just alpha leaders, Morris chimed in. According to these records, humans provided something shadow fangs couldn't. Fire, advanced tools, and most importantly, long-term strategic planning. In exchange, shadow fangs provided protection, enhanced hunting capabilities, and what appears to be emotional companionship. Tank looked at Buster, who was now lying on his side while Park examined his massive paws. So what happened? Why did the partnership end? Morris, scan forward in the archaeological record. When do the joint depictions stop? Approximately 12,000 years ago, Commander, coinciding with the development of agriculture and permanent human settlements. The last images show what appears to be a ceremonial farewell, with shadow fangs departing while humans remain in established communities. Demon left, Park said softly. When humans stopped being nomadic hunters, the shadow fangs moved on. But the bond never broke, did it? Apparently not, Tank said, watching as Buster's tail wagged slightly at the sound of Park's voice. The genetic memory remained. All this time, shadow fangs have been carrying the knowledge that humans are their pack leaders. Captain Zeltak made another one of his nervous sounds. This explains so much. The seemingly random attacks on settlements, the way they disappear before military forces arrive. They haven't been randomly hunting. They've been looking for us, Tank realized. All these millennia, they've been searching for their missing pack leaders. Which explains Buster's reaction to me, Park added. He wasn't learning to obey me, he was remembering how to interact with human pack leadership. Morris's voice carried a note of what could almost be called wonder. Commander, I'm detecting elevated emotional indicators from our shadow fang friend. It appears that recognition of pack structure has triggered what can only be described as profound relief. Tank looked around the laboratory, taking in the scene. A human casually interacting with a creature that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Alien researchers cowering behind makeshift barricades, and cave paintings on the display screen that suggested humanity's place in the cosmic order was far more complex than anyone had imagined. Mora, he said finally, please tell me you're seeing the bigger picture here. Oh yes, Commander. If shadow fangs have been searching for human pack leaders for 40,000 years, and if they've retained their genetic memory of cooperative behavior, then we're not dealing with a single anomalous creature. We're dealing with an entire species that's been waiting for us to come back, Tank finished. And now that they've found us again, Park said, looking up from where she was examining Buster's rather impressive dental work, we need to figure out what kind of pack leaders we want to be. Buster chose that moment to look directly at Tank and, in a gesture that was unmistakably hopeful, wagged his tail. Tank stared at the massive predator's hopeful expression and felt his life taking another one of those sharp left turns that usually ended with him filing reports no one would believe. All right, Buster, he said slowly. Let's see if this pack leadership thing actually works. Sit. The shadow fang immediately sat, his massive form settling with surprising grace. His eyes remained fixed on Tank with an intensity that was either deeply respectful or calculating the best angle of attack. Tank preferred to assume it was respect. Stay, Tank commanded, holding up his hand. Buster remained motionless, though his tail continued its hopeful wagging, creating a rhythmic thumping sound against the laboratory floor that suggested he was quite pleased with this development. Morris, Tank said quietly, are you getting readings on this? Fascinating data streams, Commander. The creature's stress indicators have dropped to nearly zero, while his attention and compliance markers are off the charts. It's as if you've activated some kind of dormant programming. More like awakened genetic memory, Dr. Park corrected, practically bouncing with scientific excitement. Tank, try something more complex, something that would require actual understanding rather than simple conditioning. Tank thought for a moment, then pointed toward the far end of the laboratory where some equipment had been scattered during the initial panic. Buster, go check that area for anything dangerous, then come back and report. The Shadowfang immediately rose and padded over to the designated area, his massive form moving with predatory grace. He sniffed carefully around the scattered equipment, nudged a few pieces back into organized piles, and then returned to Tank. Once there, he sat down and made a low, rumbling sound that somehow conveyed, "Area secure, nothing threatening detected." "Oh, come on," Captain Zeltok said weakly from behind his barricade. "That is not normal predator behavior. That is military reconnaissance behavior." "Actually," Science Officer Primo observed, several of his eye stalks tracking Buster's movements, "it is remarkably similar to the patrol patterns used by trained security forces. The creatures swept the area systematically, assessed potential threats, and provided a clear status report." Tank felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. "Morris, run a comparison between Buster's search pattern and standard military reconnaissance protocols." "Running comparison now, Commander. Oh my, the correlation is 97%. This creature just performed a textbook security sweep." "Dr. Park," Tank said carefully, "what exactly have you been having Buster do for the past 3 days?" Park looked slightly embarrassed. "Well, I may have asked him to help organize the lab, and to keep watch while I worked, and possibly to patrol the corridors to make sure nothing else dangerous was lurking around." "Why?" "Because," Tank said, "you've been unconsciously reactivating 40,000 years of cooperative military partnership. Buster hasn't just been acting like a pet. He's been acting like a subordinate officer awaiting orders." As if to prove the point, Buster approached Tank and performed what could only be described as a formal salute, if salutes were performed by massive space predators using their heads. "Commander," Morris said, "I'm detecting incoming signatures on long-range sensors. Multiple contacts, approaching fast." Tank's blood ran cold. "Please tell me those are friendly research vessels coming to check on the station." "I'm afraid not, Commander. Energy signatures match those of Shadowfang life signs. I count at least 6 distinct contacts, possibly more." The laboratory fell completely silent except for the hum of life support systems and Buster's continued purring, which had taken on a slightly different quality. Less contentment, more anticipation. "6 more Shadowfangs," Captain Zeltok said faintly. "We are all going to die. We are going to be remembered as the research team that accidentally summoned a pack of legendary space monsters." "Actually," Dr. Park said thoughtfully, "I think they're coming because Buster called them." "Team what now?" Tank asked. "Think about it. Pack animals don't operate alone for extended periods. When Buster found humans again, his first instinct would be to notify the rest of his pack. We've been so focused on his behavior toward us that we haven't considered his behavior toward his own species." Morris's voice carried a note of alarm. "Commander, the incoming Shadowfangs are not approaching in an attack formation. They're approaching in what appears to be a formal delegation pattern." "A delegation?" Tank repeated. "Yes, Commander. They're maintaining specific distances, following prescribed approach vectors, and broadcasting what can only be described as identification signals. This isn't a hunting pack, this is a diplomatic envoy." Tank looked at Buster, who had stood up and was now facing the station's main docking bay with unmistakable anticipation. "Buster, are your friends coming for a pack meeting?" The Shadowfang looked at Tank and made a sound that was definitely affirmative. Then he did something that made everyone in the laboratory freeze. He bowed his head in a gesture of obvious respect and submission. "Oh no," Tank muttered. "Oh no, no, no. Morris, please tell me I'm not understanding this correctly." "I'm afraid you are, Commander. Based on observed pack dynamics, Buster has just formally acknowledged you as the alpha leader of his pack, which means that when his friends arrive, they'll be expecting to meet their new pack commander." "The new what?" Tank's voice cracked slightly. Dr. Park was grinning like someone who'd just solved the universe's most interesting puzzle. "Tank, I think you're about to become the first human pack leader of a Shadowfang delegation in 40,000 years. Congratulations." Through the laboratory's viewports, the shapes of 6 more Shadowfangs could be seen approaching the station in perfect formation, their movements coordinated and purposeful. They weren't coming to attack. They were coming to meet their new commanding officer. "Morris," Tank said weakly, "please update my personnel file. Under job requirements never expected to encounter, add leading a pack of legendary space predators." "Already updated, Commander. I've also taken the liberty of requisitioning a larger command chair. I suspect you're going to need it." 20 minutes later, Tank stood in the main docking bay of Harmony's Edge, watching 6 additional Shadowfangs file through the airlock in what could only be described as the galaxy's most terrifying receiving line. Each creature was roughly the same size as Buster, which meant the docking bay now contained enough concentrated predatory power to conquer a small moon, and all of it was looking at him expectantly. "Morris," Tank muttered under his breath, "please tell me you have some kind of protocol for this situation." "Commander, I've searched through diplomatic archives of 47 different species, and I can confidently say that nowhere in galactic history is there a precedent for human assumes pack leadership of legendary space monsters. You're going to have to improvise." Dr. Park, who had positioned herself slightly behind Tank with the enthusiasm of someone watching the galaxy's most dangerous nature documentary, whispered, "Remember, they're looking for strong, confident leadership. Think Alpha Wolf, but with better communication skills." "Right," Tank said. "Alpha Wolf, with communication skills, and hopefully without the part where I get challenged for dominance by creatures that could use me as a toothpick." The lead Shadowfang, who was slightly larger than the others and bore several scars that suggested considerable combat experience, approached Tank with careful, measured steps. When it reached what appeared to be a respectful distance, it performed the same head bow that Buster had demonstrated earlier. Tank, operating on instinct and a desperate hope that he wasn't about to become the galaxy's most dignified snack, stepped forward and placed his hand on the creature's massive head. "I see you," he said, borrowing from every leadership manual he'd ever read, and several he'd made up on the spot. "You are welcome in this pack." The reaction was immediate and profound. The scarred Shadowfang's eyes widened with what could only be described as relief, and it made a low, rumbling sound that conveyed deep satisfaction. The other 5 creatures immediately followed suit, approaching in turn to receive the same greeting. "Commander," Morris said quietly, "I'm detecting elevated emotional indicators from all 7 Shadowfangs. Whatever you just did, it appears to have been exactly what they were hoping for." "Be waiting," Dr. Park whispered in amazement. "All this time, they've been waiting for someone to welcome them back into the pack structure." Captain Zeltak, who had reluctantly emerged from the laboratory to witness what he was certain would be a massacre, stood transfixed. "This is impossible. These creatures have terrorized shipping lanes for centuries. They have destroyed entire outposts, and now they are greeting a human like long-lost family members." "Actually," Tank said, beginning to understand the larger picture, "I don't think they were terrorizing anyone. I think they were looking for us." He addressed the assembled Shadowfangs, feeling slightly ridiculous but pressing on anyway. "You've been searching for pack leaders, haven't you? All those attacks on settlements, all those encounters with ships, you weren't hunting, you were investigating." The scarred leader made an affirmative sound and then did something that made everyone in the docking bay freeze. It began to communicate, not in words but in a series of rumbles, growls, and body movements that somehow conveyed complex meaning. "Morris," Tank said, "please tell me you're recording this." "Every nuance, Commander, and I believe I'm beginning to understand the basic structure of their communication. It appears to be a combination of vocal tones, physical postures, and what can only be described as emotional projection." Dr. Park pulled out her portable scanner and began taking readings. "This is incredible. They're not just communicating, they're sharing information about their search patterns, their encounters with other species, their growing frustration at not finding what they were looking for." "What were they looking for specifically?" Tank asked. The scarred leader approached him again, this time making a series of sounds while gesturing with its massive head toward Tank, then toward the other humans, then toward the stars visible through the docking bay's viewing ports. "I think," Dr. Park said slowly, "it's trying to tell us that they've been searching the galaxy for humans. Not just any humans, but humans who remember the old partnership." Tank felt the weight of 40,000 years of history settling on his shoulders. "You want to resume the Pack Alliance, don't you? Not just with us, but with humanity as a whole." The affirmative response from all 7 Shadowfangs was unmistakable. Science Officer Primo, who had been frantically taking notes throughout the encounter, looked up from his datapad. "Commander, the implications of this are staggering. If Shadowfangs are willing to resume cooperative relations with humans, It would fundamentally alter the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy. More than that, Captain Zeltak added weakly, it would make humans the only species capable of controlling the galaxy's most feared predators. The Galactic Council would have no choice but to acknowledge humanity as a major power. Tank looked around at the assembled Shadowfangs, all of whom were watching him with expressions that somehow managed to be both predatory and hopeful. Here's the thing, though. I can't make decisions for all of humanity. I'm just one guy with a questionable career trajectory and a tendency to end up in weird situations. Buster approached Tank and gently nudged his shoulder, then made a sound that was clearly meant to be reassuring. I think, Dr. Park said, they understand that. But they need to start somewhere. And you're the first human in 40,000 years who's demonstrated natural pack leadership with their species. So what do you want from me? Tank asked the assembled creatures. What kind of partnership are you looking for? The response was immediate and coordinated. All 7 Shadowfangs moved into formation around Tank and the other humans, creating a protective circle that somehow managed to be both respectful and absolutely intimidating to anyone who might be watching. Morris, Tank said, please tell me you're getting this. Commander, I believe they've just demonstrated exactly what they're offering. Protection, loyalty, and partnership in exchange for human leadership and guidance. It's the same arrangement that existed 40,000 years ago, updated for a spacefaring civilization. Tank looked at Dr. Park, who was practically vibrating with excitement. Luna, how would you feel about becoming the galaxy's first modern Shadowfang behavioral specialist? Are you kidding me? She said. This is the discovery of a lifetime. Of course I'm in. Captain Zeltak, Science Officer Primo, I'm going to need you to contact the Galactic Council. Tell them that humanity has just been recognized as the official handlers of Shadowfang populations and that we're open to negotiations regarding cooperative security arrangements. You're serious about this, Captain Zeltak said faintly. Dead serious. Morris, please record an official log entry. Today marks the beginning of a new era of human Shadowfang cooperation, and apparently, I'm now the galaxy's first official pack leader. The 7 Shadowfangs responded to this announcement with what could only be described as approving growls, and Tank realized that his Tuesday had just become significantly more complicated than he'd ever imagined possible. 3 weeks later, Tank sat in what was officially designated as the Galactic Pack Leadership Coordination Office, aboard the newly commissioned Starship Alpha's call, reviewing reports that would have been science fiction a month ago and were now just another Tuesday. Morris, he said, leaning back in his command chair, which was indeed larger and now equipped with what the Requisitions Department had labeled Apex Predator Interaction Protocols. Give me the status report on the Colony Integration Program. Certainly, Commander, or should I say Galactic Pack Leader Tank. I'm still not entirely sure which title takes precedence. Let's stick with Commander. I'm still getting used to the whole respected by creatures that could eat starships thing. As you wish. Current status, 17 human colonies have successfully integrated Shadowfang protection packs. 0 hostile incidents, 0 casualties, and, remarkably, crime rates in protected sectors have dropped by 94%. Tank nodded, watching through the view screen as Buster and 3 of his packmates performed what could only be described as synchronized space maneuvers around a cargo vessel. They were escorting supplies to the newest human colony to request Shadowfang protection, and their formation flying was both beautiful and terrifying. Any complaints from the Galactic Council? Surprisingly few, Commander. It appears that having humans control the galaxy's most feared predators has shifted the political landscape in ways that no one quite expected. The Zentorian Trade Federation has requested human-mediated shipping lane protection. The Crystalline Consortium wants to discuss joint mining operations with Shadowfang security. And the Void Merchants Guild has offered to pay premium rates for any cargo escort services involving our toothy friends. Dr. Park's voice crackled over the communication system from the ship's expanded xenobiology lab. Tank, you need to see this. I've just finished the behavioral analysis on our newest pack members and the results are fascinating. Tank made his way to the lab, where Park had set up what looked like the galaxy's most dangerous training facility. Several Shadowfangs were practicing complex maneuvers while Park took notes on a datapad that was roughly the size of a small table. What am I looking at, Luna? Advanced tactical coordination, she said excitedly. These aren't just predators, Tank. They're strategists. Watch this. She activated a holographic display showing a simulated asteroid field with hostile forces. Computer, run training scenario 7. The assembled Shadowfangs immediately formed up and began executing a complex tactical maneuver that involved coordinated flanking, distraction techniques, and what appeared to be advanced battlefield communication. It was like watching a pack of wolves that had graduated from military academy. Sweet nebulae, Tank muttered. They've been developing these skills for 40,000 years, haven't they? That's exactly what I think, Park confirmed. While they were searching for humans, they were also evolving their tactical capabilities. They've been preparing for the day when they could resume cooperative operations. Morris, Tank called out, please tell me the Galactic Council understands that humans now have access to the galaxy's most advanced organic tactical force? Oh, they understand, Commander. In fact, Ambassador Quelnox from the Galactic Defense Consortium has requested a formal meeting to discuss incorporating human-led Shadowfang units into interstellar peacekeeping operations. Tank felt that familiar sensation of his life taking another unexpected turn. Peacekeeping operations? It makes sense, Park said. Think about it. Shadowfangs are intelligent, loyal, incredibly capable, and now that they have human leadership, they're stable and predictable. From a military perspective, they're the perfect peacekeeping force. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. Tank activated the communication panel, and the image of Captain Zeltek appeared, looking remarkably more composed than he had 3 weeks ago. Commander Morrison, Zeltok said, I have news from the Galactic Council session. The vote was unanimous. Humanity has been officially recognized as a Class 1 civilization with full diplomatic status, and you have been appointed as the first Galactic Pack leader in recorded history. Appointed by whom? Tank asked suspiciously. By everyone, actually. The Council, the various trade federations, the defense consortiums, and most importantly by the Shadowfangs themselves. Apparently word is spread through their entire species network. You're not just leading the pack we've encountered, you're the acknowledged leader of all Shadowfang packs throughout the galaxy. Tank stared at the screen. All of them? How many are we talking about? Current estimates suggest approximately 3,000 individual Shadowfangs, organized into roughly 400 packs scattered across 17 star systems. 3,000? Tank repeated weakly. I'm the pack leader of 3,000 legendary space predators. Congratulations, Commander, Morris said cheerfully. I've updated your personnel file again. Under career achievements, I've added single-handedly elevated humanity to galactic superpower status through superior dog training skills. Park was grinning like someone who just discovered the universe's best secret. Tank, do you realize what this means? Humans aren't just another species anymore. We're the bridge between civilization and the galaxy's apex predators. We're mediators, protectors, and partners in the truest sense. And, Captain Zeltok added, the Galactic Council has voted to establish the Human Shadowfang Cooperative as the primary peacekeeping force for the Outer Territories. Your species has gone from interesting newcomers to essential galactic partners in less than a month. Tank looked around his new command center, taking in the sight of humans and Shadowfangs working together, the displays showing successful colony integrations, and the communication logs filled with requests for cooperation from species that had never given humanity a second thought. Morris, he said finally, remember when my biggest worry was cataloging gas giant compositions? I do indeed, Commander. I also remember you saying that boring jobs were for boring people. Right. Well, I think it's safe to say that my job is no longer boring. Through the view screen, Tank could see more Shadowfang packs arriving for integration training, their movements graceful and purposeful. Each pack represented another piece of the ancient partnership being rebuilt, another step toward a future where humans and their 40,000-year-old allies worked together to keep the galaxy safe. More thing, Commander, Morris said, his tone carrying a note of barely concealed amusement. I've completed preliminary scans on those other extinct species we discussed. You know, the ones that might have similar ancient relationships with humanity. Tank closed his eyes. Please tell me it's not 12 other species. Oh no, Commander, my apologies for the earlier miscalculation. Thank goodness. It's actually 18 other species, including what appears to be a race of sentient warbears from the Andromeda sector, and something the database describes as cosmic dragons with abandonment issues. Tank opened his eyes and looked at Buster, who had just entered the lab and was wagging his tail hopefully. Buster, please tell me your species doesn't have any friends who might also be looking for their long-lost human pack leaders. Buster tilted his massive head thoughtfully, then made a sound that Tank had learned meant, well, funny you should ask. Morris, Tank said with resignation, please update my job description again, and this time, maybe include a hazard pay calculation. Already on it, Commander. Though I should mention that the Galactic Council has offered you a rather substantial salary increase, along with your own fleet, a diplomatic immunity card, and what appears to be a lifetime supply of premium coffee. Tank looked at his coffee cup, which for the first time in years actually contained something that resembled real coffee. You know what, Morris? Maybe this Galactic Pack leader thing won't be so bad after all. Outside the view screen, the stars stretched endlessly in all directions, and somewhere among them, ancient partnerships were awakening. Legendary creatures were remembering their purpose, and humanity had found its place in a cosmos far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had ever imagined. Even if it did mean Tank's Tuesday afternoons were never going to be boring again.